Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, coming back with a live stream at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, 6 Central Time there in Oxford, Mississippi, with the Ole Miss Rebels coming off 6-6 under Matt Luke. We got Jake Evans on the line from the Rebel Walk. I would like to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you love college football. And if you just want to catch the audio, it's at Google Play, Podbean, Stitcher, and iTunes. And, of course, the Rebel Walk. Our friends over there at the Rebel Walk, Ole Miss Evie and company, and she has highly recommended you, Jake. So we appreciate you jumping on board.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
This football team, it's an interesting situation. It's not one that was a whole lot of fun for Rebel Nation here in the last year or two. Certainly coming off the highs of 2014 and 15 and the big wins under Hugh Freeze and all that talent, but it kind of came crashing down. But it's not nearly as bad as it could have been. You get through the bowl ban this year, some scholarship reductions. Certainly that's going to play out in regards to depth and special teams for a few years. But you got a guy in place that certainly loves this university, loves this program. There's maybe some skepticism as to whether he is big enough for the job. It's an SEC job. Can he handle it? So your thoughts about Matt Luke?
Outspokenly, I love Matt Luke. I think there's no doubt that there are better football minds out there. I don't think you can argue that. I mean, he never had the experience as a head coach before he got on board here last year. But I think that sometimes that part of the head coach gets a little bit overplayed, and a lot of times you get a guy who's a great football mind but really isn't in touch with his university and his players and kind of the community around it. And that's kind of one of the biggest things in Oxford is, you know, this whole town lives and dies by the sports here. That's just kind of how it's always been. And he's a player, you know, he played here. He's been here for 10, 15 years. He knows the ins and outs of this school, the town, its fans, everything that, you know, this city thrives on and the players and the sport thrive on. And I think that's something that is doesn't get enough attention, and that's something that really plays into him here. And I think that's really helping him a lot in recruiting as well, because he really can speak to those players and tell them, you know, this is how it is. I know what you're going through. I've been through it. I've been through it here. And I think it's a big thing that helps him, and kind of, you know, he can get his players to play for him and each other.
So, Jake, I was covering Ole Miss football the first time around with Matt Luke as a player facing NCAA sanctions when Tommy Tuberville came in. Joe Lee Dunn had been the head coach and was the interim guy to a certain extent, bridging the gap between the NCAA issues and Tommy Tuberville taking over and really lifting Ole Miss to a spot that it hadn't enjoyed for quite some time. And Matt Luke certainly being a leader on that football team. And it was just amazing for me to see the progress and just the cycle of life of sorts some 20 years later, and Matt Luke experiencing this from the standpoint of being the leader of the entire program and being given the keys to a very difficult situation, but a great opportunity. Right. And to see a team that could have folded up, especially against what's most likely top to bottom, the best division in college football, and stay competitive, win 5 of 7 down the stretch, get to 6 wins, keep it at 500. That has to count for something.
I think absolutely. I mean, I think that one of the things that Matt Luke really stressed throughout all of last year, and once he got the job officially, one of the things that was huge for him that he kept preaching was changing the culture here and creating a new identity for a team that had kind of been, you know, for the last couple of years, whenever you heard the name, whenever you heard Ole Miss football, the first thing that anybody who wasn't an Ole Miss fan thought was NCAA sanctions, they're cheating, Hugh Freeze, the scandals, all this, and it was nothing positive. And I think that was one of the things that he really wanted to change, was something, when you hear Ole Miss football, you think of the tradition and the culture and the hard work, and you want to think of something positive. And, you know, I think that's evident. I don't think the Ole Miss team from a couple years ago comes back and wins that game against Kentucky on the road. That was a huge win for him. I think the same thing at Mississippi State. Granted, the Nick Fitzgerald injury definitely played into the result of that game a little bit, but I don't think that that team without Matt Luke goes in to Kentucky and Mississippi State and wins those 2 games. And I kind of think that right there was the first 2 examples of that culture change that he wants. And I think he's doing a fantastic job of that already.
Yeah, there's 2 wins down the stretch of the season against 2 quality opponents that went on to bowl games, and were certainly mid-tier to upper-tier teams in the SEC, especially Mississippi State, of course, and what they accomplished in postseason play. Jake, we understand that the school is appealing, the football program appealing the 2018 bowl ban, so there is some hope that possibly postseason plays in the cards this year, and you don't have to suffer through another season in which you know that the Egg Bowl's the end of the line. I want to get your thoughts about the vibe on campus and in regards to the entire Rebel Nation concerning you experienced 2 of the best seasons in program history, and certainly in recent times in 2014 and 15 with Hugh Freeze. He had to be the talk of the town, the talk of the state. He was the guy, and bringing in all that talent, playing with Alabama, winning those 2 consecutive games against the Tide, appearing in big bowl games, winning the Sugar Bowl, the whole deal. And then anytime there are NCAA sanctions that are presented and there are those alleged transgressions, then you put the fan base in a place where they want to root for their guy, they want to defend their guy, but nobody knows what the truth is at that point. And then when the outcome is finally determined, there's a sense of betrayal because we stood up for this guy. We thought he was our guy. We believed him, and that didn't turn out to be the case. So to go from there and now see some hope and optimism with one of your own as the leader of the program. Wow, there's been a roller coaster ride here for a couple of years.
Yeah, it was for the majority of my life, Ole Miss football has been on the downside. But for a few years here and there with Eli Manning, and then a couple years with Hugh Freeze, it was a quick rise, and then it kind of leveled back out towards the bottom a little bit. But when Hugh Freeze, when he came in, he built a fantastic program very fast. On the back of that 2013 class with Robert Kimdichie, Laquan Treadwell, those guys, he built it up very fast, and he got everybody excited. And I think, as a fan, I like to think that drew more attention to the situation in the program as a whole than maybe it deserved at first. Now, clearly there was something there in the end, but I think that was kind of a culture shock that the Ole Miss fan base and the nation as a whole was not used to seeing. I mean, I think, to a lot of people who didn't really ever follow Ole Miss at all of a sudden you looked up and in that one season, I think it was 2014, Ole Miss and Mississippi State were both in the top 5 and for a couple of weeks. And I think everybody outside of the South was looking around like, what the heck is going on? Like these are not the teams that we're used to seeing. And so it was a quick rise, and you hated to see it go down. And when it did go down, it was something that a lot of fans really felt betrayed about, because Hugh Freeze built us up with so much hope. He built up the fan base and the players and the school with so much hope, and then all of a sudden it just came crashing down. And there was really nothing that an Ole Miss fan or student or player could say back to it other than you're right, that happened, and you can't really defend it, because when it all comes down and it's proven, you just feel kind of foolish about it. And so I think on the back of that and that quick fall and that, embarrassing in the national spotlight, that's one of the reasons I love Matt Luke so much is, Ole Miss didn't bring in some huge name guy, pay him a ton of money, all that. They brought in a guy who knows the school, loves the school, the fans, everything around it. And he's, from what I can see last year, this summer, this spring, everything, he's coming in and he's just quietly trying to build back up the team to what he thinks it can be, what, all the fans and what all of Oxford knows and wants it to be. And, that again, that's part of one of the reasons I love him so much is I think he's just he's coming in. He wants that bad spotlight to go away, and he wants to quietly work in the shadows there and build it back up.
All right, Jake, we're going onward. We're going forward. We're going to push forward to 2018 and look at this Rebels team competing in what's most likely the best division in college football. And, of course, you got a quarterback in Jordan Ta'amu, who had to take over for an injured Shea Patterson. Now, obviously, the much publicized transfer to Michigan. But Ta'amu really acquitted himself down the stretch. 11 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. This team second in the SEC to Drew Lock's outfit there at Mizzou in passing yardage in the SEC last season. Now, a lot of that had to do with being behind in some games, but still, your thoughts about Jordan's progression and what do you expect of him this season?
I mean, one of the things I was thinking about the other day, I don't really know if you could consider him a breakout player per se for this season, but I certainly think that, when I certainly think that he could be that this season. I mean, he came in last year and he made it. He the first time everybody saw him and recognized him was that LSU game, and everybody was wondering who in the world is this guy. We had everything was on Shea Patterson, and all of a sudden he goes down, and everybody's thinking, "Oh my goodness, this is like everything is going down fast." And so when he stepped on, he was great down the stretch. He's another one of those guys. He doesn't draw a lot of attention. He's really quiet, even when he talks to the media. He's not being rude or anything. He doesn't have a lot to say. He just plays, and that's one of the things too. That they've been stressing that they're trying to build up with him this year is him being more of a vocal leader, outspoken, being the voice, of unity on that offense, because there's a lot of returning starters, but he's the one that brings them all together, and he's the kind of quarterback that Ole Miss has thrived with the last few years, as far as having a really strong arm, being very accurate. He moves his feet well, and that's kind of where Ole Miss's offense has shifted in the last few years, and so. He was fantastic at the end of last season. I really think he's going to build on that, and especially considering the fact that he's bringing back all of his wide receivers and his offensive line. I really think he's in a good position to have a fantastic year this year.
Yeah, certainly A.J. Brown is one of the best in the business, coming off 1,252 yards and 11 touchdowns receiving. A.J. Brown, the number one pass receiver for a team that finished 11th in the nation in pass offense. This is something I've discussed with Evie a number of times, even when Ole Miss was having those banner seasons in 14 and 15. The difference at that point between Ole Miss and the gold standard Alabama and a few of the other top teams at that point was a running game that wasn't quite dominant. It's been difficult to find that guy that could be a dominant back or that committee of backs like you see it sometimes at Alabama or Florida State and some other places that can take hold. Now you recruited this. You've got a number of guys coming into the fold, but your thoughts about the running game in particular?
I think one of the things, like you said, that your Alabamas have had and that they've had so much success with, and I think it's the same thing with LSU too. They've had a lot of success running the ball hard downhill between the tackles. And the thing is when you do that and you do that well and you are committed to doing that, that says to the other team, we're not afraid to come right at you. We don't need to open the bag of tricks. We don't need to rely on the speed outside and the moves and things like that. They just want to run it right down your throat and let them, let the other team know that they're there. And that's one of the things that Ole Miss has really struggled with the last few years. It really seems like the last few years, with the exception of Jordan Wilkins, who is a little bit of a bigger back, Ole Miss has almost exclusively recruited backs that are under 6 feet. That are, right now I think we have 3 running backs on the roster who are 5'9", 5'10", right around there. And so, Ole Miss's prototypical running back in the last few years, and it kind of plays into that spread offense, has been, a smaller, quicker guy who bounces around and doesn't put his head down and just run through the middle of the line as much. And, it works well with the spread offense, but one of the things that I really would like to see this year, and I think they've been focusing more, and it looked like they were more in the spring, is having an offense that doesn't just run the ball to keep the offense balanced and keep the secondary, keep them guessing and not have them just bailing out every time. I one of the things that I really think that Ole Miss is going to try and take a huge step with this year is having a running game that can legitimately threaten and run the ball downhill and make other teams respect them. And, if they can do that, that makes Metcalf, A.J. Brown, DeMarcus Lodge, Dawson Knox, all those guys that much more dangerous because you get a lot more of those single coverage. You don't have as many safeties floating around in the back there. That's one of the things that I think Ole Miss is really trying to do this year. And if they can do it, it's going to make their offense a lot more dangerous.
We are happy to have Jake Evans on the line. You can join him at the Rebel Walk for the best in Ole Miss football coverage and sports across the board. Of course, we talk college football here at Mark Rogers TV. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, where we bring on the very best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the industry. And of course, you've got to put up with some analysis from myself as well. The audio you can catch at Google Play, Podbean, Stitcher, and iTunes. Just search Mark Rogers TV. So I hate to do it to you, Jake, but we're going to talk some defense.
All right.
115th in the nation in total defense last year. Now, that's not the outfit that Hugh Freeze had on the field just 3 or 4 years ago that I thought was one of the top 5 to 10 defenses in the nation. So they got pounded on the ground, 29 rushing touchdowns against this defense at 5.5 yards per carry. So something needs to change drastically there. Is there some hope?
I think there's some hope this year. I would love to think as a fan that there's hope, but I legitimately think that there is hope. Ole Miss has, the last few years, like I was saying earlier, since the likes of, Robert Nkemdiche and those few years of great defenses that Ole Miss had, since the likes of those guys have left, Ole Miss has struggled and they've had good players on their defense. They just haven't put it all together as a single solid defensive unit for a whole season. And they've struggled up and down at different times. They've struggled in the secondary, up front, at the linebackers, different things. And so that's been a huge focus in recruiting the last few years because, Ole Miss had one of the best scoring offenses in the nation last year. But if you score 45 points and you give up 48, that 45 doesn't mean much. And that was one of the things that Ole Miss was just constantly in an offensive battle last year, and it put a lot more pressure on guys like Te'amu and A.J. Brown and guys like those to make plays more often. And so I think there is hope. Throughout the spring, they stressed that McGriff and Matt Luke and everybody, they think that the pieces are all there. They just haven't exactly figured out how to fit them together yet to get that defense that they think they have.
Jake, a lot of college football fans just love recruiting. They can't get enough of it. The gossip and the projection and the conjecture and everything. I just want to see the list on National Signing Day to see who signed with who, and just give me the final list. I don't need all the conjecture for months and months and months. But you got Matt Corral coming into the fold, and here's a very talented player that steps on campus. But you're pretty stable in the number 1 position at quarterback. Do you think there's a spot for Corral to make a push here, or your thoughts about him joining the Rebels?
I think Matt Corral is doing a really solid job, and everybody around the team thinks the same thing. That was the vibe all spring, was that as soon as he got there, at first the first challenge was learning that playbook so that he could go out there and actually make the plays and just know what he was doing. And, I think it sounded like he picked up on that playbook really fast, and he learned very quickly and started to adjust to having bigger guys around him, faster guys around him, and bigger and faster guys coming for him too. And so I think his style of play fits well with Te'amu's, and I think it works to the point where the two of them, Te'amu can help Corral. Corral can look up to Te'amu and see, they kind of have that same style of play where they've got the legs if they need them, but they've also got very strong arms and are both very solid pocket passers. And so I think that Corral under Te'amu this year is going to do him wonders. Honestly, I think, especially with how well Ole Miss's offense has done the last few years, I think he's going to be stepping into a very profitable situation for him next year. And I think by the end of the year that there's going to be no doubt in anybody's mind that that's the guy, and it's not just the next guy in line, that really is the guy that they want.
We're talking Ole Miss football with Jake Evans from the Rebel Walk, and we encourage you to join he and the rest of the staff right there, led by Evie Van Pelt, talking Ole Miss sports year-round, so you gain your coverage right there. And, of course, we are tapping Jake tonight for some football coverage, wrapping up the spring and looking forward to August. So, Jake, I'll let you know that I covered Ole Miss along with Mississippi State and Alabama, really the entire SEC, but those three schools in particular, well before your time, like late 90s up to 2000. And I love the NFL, but what distinguishes college football, we could make a long laundry list. But the one thing I'm going to point to right now is that the fan bases in and of themselves are distinguished. There's something different about an Ole Miss fan base from a Penn State fan base or Ohio State fan base, or you could go across the nation, and just the look, the feel, the vibe in the university on campus, everything just distinguishes college football, and each and every program has its own mark. I knew nothing but numbers and players and watching games on TV and knowing kind of where Ole Miss stood in the SEC when I went down there. But there's certainly a distinct quality to that campus, to the university, to the traditions there that makes it a very unique place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said earlier, Oxford lives and dies by this football team and by this university. And, you know, there's tons of schools across the country, all your small towns, your college towns, your Auburns, places like that say, you know, the school is the heart of the city. And that's the case in Oxford. And that's one of the reasons that it's so great and that so many people love being here, is that, you know, when during the fall, during football season, Saturdays, it's not just game day for the Rebels. It's game day for everybody. The city shuts down and revolves around those 3 hours of Vaught-Hemingway. I mean, it's really crazy to see. I've seen it my whole life, and then this year, my freshman year here, it's really wild that, you know, it's an entire city's effort on the same day to help the Rebels win. And, you know, you get about 60,000 people in the stadium, but then you get tens of thousands more that are still in and around in the Grove, in the circle around the city, that are watching, that are tuned in, that just love it so much. And, you know, that's part of one of the reasons I love doing what I've been doing lately so much, is that people in Oxford, Ole Miss fans always want to talk Ole Miss football. They love it to death. And that's one of the things that is so great about it, is that it's not just those 11 guys on the field and the guys on the sideline. It's everybody in the stadium, everybody in the whole city, and, you know, all the Rebel fans are in and around Mississippi. So, you know, it's a really special place, and that's one of the things that I really think that players love about it, why players want to come here, and why, you know, people after they go to school here, they stay around Oxford. It's just because it's such a special place.
Jake, I've enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate you coming by. I'll let you know that if you stop by at another time and there's not a whole lot going on, I'll serve up some of these questions for you. So you think about these. Best Ole Miss win since you've been a fan. Just the win that still makes you feel good, brings a smile to your face.
I'll give you that.
Most excruciating loss, the one that still stings. Favorite player, best player since you've been watching. You could go into the archives and go all time if you want to, but I don't want you to do any homework. So your favorite player and the best player since you've been watching Ole Miss football and been a fan, and then also just looking at the current team, who you really like as a favorite player. Which you can never answer incorrectly because it's your favorite. And then who's the best player on the team. So maybe next time we have you back and we kick that around, as well as whatever else is going on with Ole Miss football at the time.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Jake Evans, the Rebel Walk. We encourage you to stop by and check out all the information on Ole Miss football and all the other sports right there. Jake, we appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you much, Mark.